3 weeks ago, my roommate stood in my doorway at 1 a.m., wrapped in a bathrobe, hair damp from a cold shower she'd taken just to survive the heat, and asked me a question that changed everything between us. Can I sleep in here tonight? 4 words. That's all it took to turn 8 months of careful, comfortable distance into something neither of us knew how to name. Pause if you're new here. I tell true stories about the messy, complicated, real parts of life. Relationships that don't fit in a neat box. Moments where you have to decide in about 3 seconds who you actually are when nobody's watching. This is one of those stories. Stick around, because by the end of this, you're going to have to ask yourself the same question I did that night. Where exactly is the line between being a good roommate and being something more? And what happens when that line just dissolves in 98-degree heat? Let's go back to the beginning. My name doesn't matter for this story, so let's just say I'm the narrator, and my roommate, I'll call her Mara, because privacy matters and this is still her life too. Mara and I had been living together for 8 months when this happened. We weren't friends before we became roommates. We were strangers who matched on a housing app, did one 30-minute video call, and decided we could probably tolerate each other for a year-long lease. That's it. That's how low the bar was. But here's the thing about living with someone. Really living with someone, sharing a kitchen and a hallway, and the particular exhaustion of a Tuesday. You learn a person in a way that has nothing to do with romance and everything to do with honesty. You see them without makeup. You hear them cry through a wall when they think no one's listening. You know exactly how they take their coffee, and you make it for them sometimes without being asked. And you don't even clock that as a big deal until you look back and realize nobody does that for a stranger. Mara worked long shifts at a hospital as a nurse. I worked from home doing something in software that I won't bore you with. Our schedules barely overlapped most days. We'd leave little notes on the whiteboard on the fridge. Used your creamer. Restocking Thursday. Sorry. And that was basically the extent of our relationship for the first 6 months. Somewhere around month 7, though, something shifted. Small things. She started leaving me a coffee when she got home from a night shift if I was still asleep. I started saving her a plate when I cooked, even though I never used to cook for anyone but myself. We started watching one show together, just one, on Sunday nights, because it turned out we both quietly loved the same trashy reality dating show, and neither of us wanted to admit it alone. I want to be honest with you. I noticed her. Of course I noticed her. She had this laugh that came out like a surprise, like she wasn't expecting to be that amused and it just escaped her. She had opinions about everything and she'd defend them with this intensity that I found, if I'm being fully honest, incredibly attractive. But we had an unspoken rule. Neither of us ever said it out loud, but we both understood it. Don't complicate the lease. Don't be the reason this falls apart. Roommates who date and break up have to live together afterward, and that's a horror story neither of us wanted to star in, so I filed it away. Just noticing. Nothing more. Then July happened. If you've never lived through a real heat wave, I need you to understand. This wasn't just hot outside hot. This was the kind of heat that made the news. The kind where the city opened cooling centers in libraries and community halls. The kind where the asphalt felt like it might liquefy under your shoes. It started on a Monday. The forecast said 104. By Wednesday, it was 109, with a heat index that made it feel closer to 115. Record-breaking, they said. The kind of heat wave that comes around once a decade if you're unlucky. Our apartment building was old, charming, but old, and the air conditioning units were these window units that had clearly seen better decades. Mine, in my room, was straining but holding on. Mara's, on the other hand, had been making this rattling noise for about a week that we'd both been ignoring. The way you ignore a check engine light because you're hoping it fixes itself, it did not fix itself. Tuesday night, right in the middle of the worst of it, Mara's AC unit made one final, defeated clunk and died. I remember hearing it from my room. Not the unit itself, but her voice, muffled through the wall. Oh, come on. Come on. And then a string of increasingly creative curse words that, honestly, made me laugh into my pillow before I caught myself. She knocked on my door that first night, hair pulled back, tank top stuck to her with sweat, holding her phone with a maintenance request already typed out. Mine died, she said. like I hadn't heard the whole performance through the wall. Full send. It's not even blowing warm air. It's just off. Dead. I already put in a request, but you know this building. They'll get to it whenever the universe allows. That bad? I checked my room and it's 91 degrees. 91. Inside. I have a thermometer, I'm not exaggerating. I remember looking past her into the dark hallway, feeling the heat radiating off her open bedroom door like an oven left cracked. My room, by comparison, felt like a walk-in freezer. You want to bring a fan in from the hall closet? I offered. There's like 3 in there from the last tenant. She did. She dragged 2 box fans into her room that night, propped her door open, tried everything. It helped a little. Not enough. But she didn't ask for anything more than that, and I didn't offer because, again, the rule. Don't complicate the lease, that was night 1. She survived it barely, sleeping on top of her covers with a fan blasting directly on her and a bag of frozen peas resting on her collarbone, which she told me about the next morning with this exhausted, delirious laugh. I looked like I was recovering from surgery, she said, pouring coffee with shaking, sleep-deprived hands. A fan and some peas. That was my whole system. I told her maintenance would probably come that day. They did not come that day. Day 2 of the heat wave, the city hit a new record. 111 degrees officially, with a heat advisory that told people to stay indoors, hydrate constantly, and check on elderly neighbors. The kind of advisory that makes you actually a little nervous, even inside your own apartment. Maintenance called Mara back and told her, and I want you to imagine the audacity of this, that they were backed up and would try to get someone out by Friday. It was Wednesday. Her room, by that evening, had climbed to 94 degrees. She'd tried everything at that point. She'd taped a wet towel over the window to block the sun during the day. She'd frozen bottles of water and lined them up like some kind of makeshift cooling system. She'd even asked her hospital if she could pick up an extra overnight shift just so she'd have somewhere cool to be, but they were fully staffed that night for once, and she got turned down. I watched all of this happen over 2 days. I watched someone who is, by profession, someone who takes care of other people, who has this instinct to just push through and not make a fuss, slowly get worn down by something as simple and as brutal as heat, with nowhere to escape it. Around 10 that night, I was in the living room, my door open, cool air drifting out into the hallway from my room. I could hear her moving around in hers, the click of a fan being adjusted, a frustrated sigh, the particular restless sound of someone trying to fall asleep in conditions the human body isn't built for. I almost said something. I got as far as standing up, walking toward the hallway, hand halfway raised to knock on her door and offer, I don't even know what. The couch, maybe. My floor. Anything cooler than what she had, but I stopped myself, because offering felt like crossing a line we'd both silently agreed not to cross. It felt like it would mean something, and I wasn't sure either of us was ready for it to mean something. So, I went back to my room, I closed my door, gently, not because I was trying to shut her out, but because the cool air was starting to slip away into the hallway and some small, practical part of my brain still cared about efficiency, even in that moment. I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling for a long time. I want to be honest with you about something. It wasn't just concern I was feeling that night. It wasn't purely selfless. Thick. With something else sitting underneath it, something I hadn't let myself look at directly in 8 months of living 4 feet away from her, separated by drywall and an unspoken rule. I fell asleep before I let myself examine it too closely. I woke up to knocking. It was 1:04 a.m. I remember the time specifically because it's burned into my memory now, the way certain small moments just fuse themselves permanently into your brain. 3 knocks. Quiet. Almost apologetic, like she'd debated doing it for a while before she actually did. I opened the door already knowing, somehow, that this was going to be different from the last 2 nights. Ah. Mara was standing there in her robe, the plain gray one she kept on a hook in the bathroom, the kind of robe that's about function, not fashion, thrown on because it was the only thing within reach that wasn't already soaked through with sweat. Her hair was damp, pushed back from her face. I found out later she'd just stood in a cold shower for 15 minutes, not even really washing anything, just standing under the water because it was the only relief she'd found in 3 days. Her eyes were tired in a way that went past just being sleepy. It was a bone-deep exhaustion, the kind that makes a person's guard drop because they simply don't have the energy left to hold it up. "I'm sorry," she said first. Before anything else. "I know it's late. I know this is weird. I just." She stopped. Started again. "Can I sleep in here tonight? I want to slow down here because I think this moment gets misunderstood if you rush through it. This wasn't some movie moment. There wasn't music swelling. There wasn't a charged, sultry pause. It was two exhausted adults at 1 in the morning, one of them standing in a hallway in a robe because her room had become genuinely unsafe to sleep in, and the other one standing in a doorway trying to figure out, in real time, what the right thing to do actually was. "My room's 96 now," she said, when I didn't answer right away. Not accusing me of hesitating, just filling the silence, almost embarrassed by it. "I checked before I came over here. I've got the peas again, but they melted an hour ago, and I can't. I really can't do a third night of this. I have a 12-hour shift tomorrow. I need actual sleep." "You don't have to explain," I said. "Of course. Yeah, come in." She let out this breath, this long, shaky exhale, like she'd been holding it the entire walk across the hallway, bracing for me to say no, or worse, to make it weird. "I can take the floor," she said, stepping in. "I brought a pillow. I'm not trying to, Mara." She stopped talking. "You're not sleeping on the floor. That's ridiculous. There's a bed right there, and it fits two people who are being normal about it. I want to be clear about something, because I think this is where a lot of stories like this either lean into something they shouldn't or lie about what actually happened. Nothing happened that night. Not in the way you might be imagining. We didn't cross any lines. She got in on one side of the bed, fully in her robe, and I stayed on the other, and we lay there in the dark, not really talking for a long moment. But something was happening anyway. Just not the something you'd expect. We talked for almost 2 hours. Neither of us fell asleep right away, despite how exhausted she was. It started small. She thanked me again, and I told her to stop thanking me, and she laughed. That surprised laugh I mentioned earlier, and said, "Sorry. Force of habit. You spend enough time in a hospital telling people it's okay to need help, and then when you need it yourself, you feel like a hypocrite for how weird it feels." That opened something up. We started talking, really talking, for the first time in 8 months of living together. Not roommate logistics. Not, "Did you get my Venmo request?" or "Can you grab paper towels?" Actual conversation. She told me about nursing school, about a patient from a few months back who'd stuck with her, an elderly man who didn't have anyone visit him, and how she'd started spending her breaks just sitting with him because nobody should be that alone. I told her about my dad, about how he'd worked outside for 30 years and how heat waves like this one made me anxious for him, in a way I usually kept quiet about. We talked about the reality show we both secretly loved, and she confessed she'd already watched 2 episodes ahead without me and felt genuinely guilty about it, which made me laugh harder than I had in weeks. At some point, I don't remember exactly when, the conversation got quieter, slower. The kind of quiet where you're both aware of how close you actually are, physically, in a bed that suddenly feels smaller than it did an hour ago. "Can I ask you something?" she said, at maybe 2:45 in the morning. "Yeah. Why didn't you ever say anything these past few months?" "I felt it. I think you felt it too. And neither of us ever said a word." I didn't answer right away. I was staring at the ceiling, very aware of her next to me, of her voice in the dark, of how much easier it is to be honest with someone when you can't fully see their face. "Because I didn't want to lose this," I finally said. "Whatever this is, the easy part, the comfortable part, I didn't want to risk it for something that might not work. And then we're stuck living together with it being awkward for the rest of the lease." "That's what I told myself too," she said. "For 8 months. Neither of us said anything else for a while after that. But it didn't feel like the silence from before, the careful, guarded kind. It felt like the kind of silence two people share when they've just admitted something true and they're letting it settle. She fell remember that clearly. The moment her breathing changed, went slow and even, and I lay there for a while just listening to it, feeling something in my chest that I hadn't let myself name in 8 months. I want to talk honestly about what the next morning was like, because this is usually the part of these stories that gets skipped over. Everyone wants the tension, the confession, The almost kiss. Nobody wants the awkward Tuesday morning where two people who admitted something at 3 a.m. now have to exist in the daylight with coffee breath and a work shift in 6 hours. It was awkward. I won't pretend it wasn't. She woke up before me, and by the time I opened my eyes, she was already sitting up, robe retied, looking at her phone like she was trying very hard to look busy. Hey, I said. Hey, a pause. So that happened. Yeah! I have a 12-hour shift starting in 4 hours, and I feel like I need to process an entire relationship revelation on maybe 5 hours of sleep, she said. And there was a laugh in it, but a nervous one. We don't have to figure everything out right now, I told her. It's early. You need to actually rest before your shift. She looked at me for a second, really looked, the way you do when you're trying to decide if someone's words match their face, and something in her shoulders relaxed. Okay, she said, but we're talking about this. Properly. Not just letting it sit there and turn into another 8 months of us pretending. Agreed. She left for her shift a few hours later. Maintenance, in a plot twist nobody saw coming, actually showed up that afternoon and fixed her AC terrain unit. Turned out to be a simple part that had failed, something they could have swapped out in 20 minutes if they'd come on day 1 instead of day 3. Funny how that works. The thing that forced the two of us to finally be honest with each other got resolved within 24 hours of it happening. If her AC had been fixed on Tuesday like it should have been, I genuinely, if we'd have had that conversation at all, we might still be circling each other, running out the clock on a lease neither of us wanted to complicate. Sometimes the universe doesn't hand you convenient timing. Sometimes it hands you a broken air conditioner in the middle of a heat wave, and it turns out that's exactly what you needed. We had the talk 3 days later. Once her AC was fixed, and the heat wave had finally broken. We sat on the living room couch, the neutral territory, not either of our bedrooms, with 2 cups of coffee and this shared understanding that we were finally going to say the things we'd been avoiding for the better part of a year. I don't want to lose you as a roommate, she said first. I want to be really clear about that. If we try this and it doesn't work, I don't want that to mean one of us has to move out and everything falls apart. I don't think either of us can promise that, I said. Nobody can promise a relationship won't end badly. That's not really how any of this works. I know. I just needed to say the scary part out loud. Okay. My scary part, then. I've liked you for months. Actually liked you. Not just noticed you exist liked you. And I've been so careful not to let that show because I convinced myself the friendship, the roommate thing, whatever we had, that it was safer, easier, and it was. But it also felt like I was lying by omission every single day. She was quiet for a moment, turning her mug in her hands. I used to leave you coffee on purpose, she admitted. Like, strategically. I told myself it was just being nice, but I liked imagining you finding it. I liked being the reason your morning was a little better. I noticed, I told her. I never said anything, but I noticed every single time. We didn't solve everything in that one conversation. Real conversations like that rarely wrap up neatly. But we agreed on something important. We were both done pretending. Whatever this was, whatever it turned into, we were going to be honest about it instead of hiding behind an unspoken rule that was really just fear wearing a practical costume. It's been 3 weeks since that night. I'm not going to sit here and tell you we've got it all figured out, because that would be a lie. And this whole story has been about the two of us finally choosing honesty over comfortable avoidance. What I can tell you is this: we're together now. Actually together, not just circling each other in a shared apartment. We still split the rent the same way. We still have the whiteboard on the fridge, though the notes on it have gotten considerably less formal. We still watch the trashy reality show on Sunday nights, except now we're on the couch next to each other instead of on opposite ends of it. Her AC unit, for the record, is working perfectly. Knock on wood? I think about that heat wave a lot, honestly. Not in a dramatic, fated-to-be way. I don't actually believe a broken air conditioner was some cosmic sign. I think what really happened is simpler than that. Sometimes you need a circumstance extreme enough to knock down the walls you've built out of fear, because on your own, you might never choose to knock them down yourself. Mara said something to me a few nights ago that I haven't been able to stop thinking about. She said, I spent 8 months being so scared of losing something good that I almost never let it become something better. I think about that a lot. I think a lot of us do that. With people, with jobs, with decisions we know deep down we need to make but keep putting off because the current version of things is comfortable enough to justify staying still. Sometimes it takes a heat wave. Sometimes it takes something breaking. But usually, the thing you're actually protecting yourself from isn't the risk of it going wrong. It's the risk of finding out it could have gone right if you'd just said something sooner. So that's the story. My roommate's AC died in a heat wave. She showed up at my door in a robe at 1 in the morning, and it turned out to be the push both of us needed to finally stop pretending. If you've ever had a moment like that, a small, ordinary crisis that forced a bigger, scarier conversation, I want to hear about it. Drop it in the comments. I read every single one, and honestly, some of the best stories on this channel started as suggestions from people just like you. If this one hit for you, hit subscribe, because I've got more stories like this coming every week. Real ones, messy ones, the kind that don't wrap up as neatly as we'd like real life to. And hey, if your AC is still working right now, appreciate it. You never know what a broken one might end up teaching you. I'll see you in the next one.